Okay, ladies and gents, let's be honest, we all know why we're here. This is arguably the most busted and I guess high value for cost product I think that the Pokemon Company has put out, I dare say ever. Obviously, I was a big fan of the Pikachu and Zekrom League Battle deck. Got my whole sealed only series, link in the description, off the ground by giving me a better start than, let's say, a pair of theme decks ever could. And, you know, the Reshizard one was fantastic and is actually having a bit of a renaissance at the moment, but that is neither here nor there. This is nuts. This literally gives you access to not just the skeleton, but a lot of the flesh and musculature of arguably the best deck in the format. Definitely solid top 3, right? I mean, Arceus Dialga Palkia is probably the most powerful card in the game, most busted one for sure, and Zacian V has proved itself over and over again as one of the most reliable 2-prize attackers out there. You put the two of them together, and it's just wow. So I actually went out and got 4 of these. I will not be cracking 4. 2 are for cracking open here, and 2 are for my collection because I want to reflect on the time in the meta when they thought it was a good idea to unleash a bunch of ADPZs on the PTCGO ladder and give every kid and their brother and sister, you know, a chance to play with this very busted deck. I can tell you it's been interesting going up against this bad boy when I'm playtesting, you know, the decks for our Hoenn Legends series. Empoleon and Garchomp have a very hard time against ADP. But anyway, let me stop with my belly aching. We know why we're here, so I'm gonna crack this guy open and we're gonna see what we are working with. Okay, got that. GX tag, dice. That's cool. Okay, yes. Very gently now. So we have our 2 Zacian V, which are the main attackers of this deck. After ADP gets set up with its Altered Creation, after Altered Creation, you hit for 260 with Brave Blade, which is kind of busted. What can I say? Also, with a 2 retreat, you can retreat for free with Air Balloon. And if you're not attacking that turn, you can use Intrepid Sword to draw 3. And if any of the cards you drew are Metal Energy, attached to it. It's energy acceleration, it's draw, it's a big beat stick, all in one card. Arguably, top 5 cards in the game, I think, at the moment. And then, of course, the gods of Pokemon themselves, ADP. What more is there to say about this? It is a huge tag team dragon. With 280 HP, you're out of range of some of the most powerful attacks, which tend to cap at 270, which is something to keep in mind. With a big charm, you can even pretty comfortably survive a Zigzagoon Ping and Eternatus using Dread and at full power. So that is something to keep in mind. Ultimate Ray is also fantastic for 3 energy, 1 water, 1 metal, and 1 of anything else. You do 150, 180 after Altered Creation, and accelerate 3 energy to anything else on the board, which means you can power up your Zacian V in one go, which is kind of busted. And of course, Altered Creation is the thing everybody's looking at for 1 metal energy, and if you also have a water energy, let's be honest, this is the important thing. You can ensure that all your Pokemon for the rest of the game do 30 more damage, and most importantly, when you take a KO, you take an extra prize. So if you knock out a VMAX, you are taking 4 prizes in 1 turn, which is kind of busted. This thing single-handedly gatekeeps most of the, you could say, more rogue or interesting decks in the format. Like Garchomp and Empoleon, for example. But I digress. So this obviously is the core of the deck. They don't give you too much because obviously there are limits, right? This is a very busted combo, but like I said, if you pick up 2 or 4, like I did, you have more than enough to get a playset of everything and have a very strong meta deck right out the gate. So let's put those aside for a second and see what else they gave us. So most of what you need are going to be there. Boss's Orders, I don't think they give you a full count of that. The Zigzagoon is great. Energy Switch to help you get that turn 1 Altered Creation. Oranguru, like this is all pretty standard. Metal Saucer to help accelerate energy into play. Viridian Forest to search for your energy. Yeah, plenty of gusting options. It looks like they are building a small scoop up net package in here. You don't see that played at the higher levels typically. Jirachi is a bit too slow now for ADP players to want to bother with it. But hey, I think just to start out, it's fantastic. It's great for your consistency. Aurora energy, also something you don't really need as long as you manage your energy attachments well enough. You usually don't have to sweat it too much. Cute things like Mallow and Lana as well, just to help heal your big guys there. So, you know, enough to start for sure. You're missing things like Cherish Balls, for example. You don't get Dedenne, anything like that. So your consistency is not as high as it could be, but I guess that's why they include the Scoop Up Net package to help you go. So, looking at this, now, obviously I could just smush two together and go with something like, okay, pretty workable. But I happen to think that ADP Z is, well, let's just say it's causing a lot of misery for the game. So rather than just make up the most busted deck in the game with a couple of these products here, I'm going to take a bit more of a creative approach with this one. So let me not ramble too much longer, but I think if I can go away and if my brewing idea works, you guys are going to see a very interesting, I hope, maybe OG classic take on ADP. So I don't know. Let's find out if I'm full of it or not. And so after a lot of testing, a little bit of tweaking, and a lot of brainstorming, we finally arrive at Green's ADP. Yeah. This deck is basically just ADP with some warm bodies to hold energy for it. That's it. It's about as straightforward of a deck profile as I could get it. No Dedenne, no Crobat, no Zacian. I've taken out everything else that could make this deck busted, and I've focused on just letting ADP do its thing and muscle through the competition. And starting with ADP, it's pretty obvious why I think we can get away with this. It's a big, beefy tag team which can rewrite the rules of the game and accelerate a ton of energy into play. After you pop Altered Creation, your Ultimate Ray hits for 180 damage while accelerating 3 energy to your Pokemon in any way you like. And really, why bother with Zacian when 2 hits from Ultimate Ray will KO everything in the game? Thanks to a healthy 280 HP, which can be 310 with a big charm, you can tank at least 1 hit from every relevant Pokemon in the game, barring some serious damage modifiers or the odd rogue fairy deck. So the plan is to follow up the GX attack with an Ultimate Ray, powering up another ADP, and once your first one is seriously wounded, you swap it out while healing with Mallow and Lana. It's that simple. Rinse and repeat until everything else is flattened. Milotic V is there to hold energy and offer a backup attacker when suitable. The same goes for Duraludon, although this little guy can also accelerate metal energy between Metal Saucer and Energy Switch, or through its own Metal Sharpener attack. This is also your get out of jail free card when faced with Decidueye, so keep that in mind. Magearna is there to mulligan if you happen to have it in the active, and to punish big benches when ADP is taking a smoke break. And the rest is pretty familiar to anyone who's piloted a standard ADP-Z deck. Green's Exploration is the only thing I'm going to mention beyond that, because it is basically your Omni Searcher for the deck, and, you know, it's the only thing keeping this deck list original, let's be honest. Because we don't play anything with abilities, Green's gives us the opportunity to search for basically any 2 cards in the deck. It can get us Ball Search, which obviously grabs a Pokemon for us. It can grab Energy Search, Stadiums, Healing, or just another supporter for the next turn. And if you use Greens in tandem with Tag Call, you basically have access to a good chunk of your deck right off the bat. So yeah, this is basically a meme deck. The only other way I could make it more of a meme deck would have been to run Ends Resolve, but I do actually want to win some games. And with that, I'm going to jump into a game and see how this weird list plays. I have a very bad feeling that it's going to do okay, actually. We've got a real treat today because I get to betray my dear friend Pikarom while piloting this monstrosity. The game plan here was pretty simple. Get multiple ADP established, pop Altered Creation, and then knock out a pair of 2-prizers or a 1-prizer and a 3-prizer for game. Now, noticing that my opponent had both Jirachi and Zapdos, I figured this was more of a classic build Pikarom, kind of like the one I started out with, so I knew I'd have plenty of targets to take throughout the game. The game starts out slowly enough, which is just fine for this deck. I'm not really rushing to do anything beyond getting off my Altered Creation because I know that once I get a big charm on an ADP, my opponent basically has to get off a Full Blitz and a Tandem Shock to take the KO. And if I can force them to waste the GX attack, that's perfectly fine. And even if they get the full effect, at best they take, 4 prizes, and then I KO back the Pikarom, taking 4 prizes. Luckily, my opponent is kind enough to feed my ADP a Jirachi pretty early on, which means that all I need to do now is take out a Pikarom or a Raichu to close out the game. Now, my opponent does get enough time to fully charge their Pikarom, and that means I do have to take a Full Blitz to the face. My opponent decides to charge up the active Pikarom, which I actually think was a mistake in this situation. The better course of action would have been to accelerate to the Raichus, ensuring a follow-up Tandem Shock to keep the game, nice and slowly paced. Not too dissimilar to the way that Zach Lesage is currently advising people to pilot Pikarom, in that, you want to be careful about what you accelerate to, you want to grind things out, feed them just enough prizes to make reset stamp live, things like that. But in this particular case, my opponent wanted it to threaten big damage right away and probably close out the game quickly. But of course, I built this deck to grind out games, so I deny my opponent the easy KO by dropping a Mallow Lana, swapping into a fresh ADP, and using Ultimate Ray to accelerate to a third one in waiting, ensuring that I have plenty of options to close out the game. Now, my opponent does manage to pop off the Tandem Shock, striking my ADP in the active and one on the bench, but it's a little too late because I can just swing in with another Ultimate Ray for game, which I do. And that almost wraps up this lolcow of an episode. I wanted to stick to one game here because A, the deck basically does the same thing every time, and B, it's ADP, so you know how this goes. Honestly, having monkeyed around with this deck for a while, it became readily apparent why people have been clamoring for this thing to get banned. While I was recording this episode, I found out that Limitless actually banned ADP from its tournaments. And you know what? I don't blame them. This card is kind of busted. A step back and looking at the game as a whole, I actually feel like ADP was so powerful that when the V and VMAX mechanics were being designed for, the Sword and Shield set, they felt the need to make them ridiculously overpowered to compensate for a format or two where that new mechanic and ADP would coexist. Now, of course, this is just applied to tag teams generally. They would have to, make the two mechanics, I guess, relatively balanced in terms of power because they would be coexisting for a while. But ADP, I think, was definitely a deciding factor in just how powerful and how big the HP was on the VMAXs that we got. I mean, just look at this thing. It is the big basic embodied. And it's proof that you don't really want to play a more interesting deck like a Garchomp or Leon Charizard or even a VMAX deck, because this thing is just more efficient, more powerful, and more consistent. Honestly, after just a couple games, I've had my fill of ADP. I mean, to be honest, if I didn't make this particular build just for the lulz, I don't think I would have had any fun at all. And in just testing the standard ADP deck, you really don't enjoy the games. They're over in 2-3 turns, and that's that. I know personally I hated playing against this deck, especially when I was pretty early on with Pikarom in the sealed only series, because, ADP is just so overwhelming that you felt that even when you made, a pretty good decision, your gameplay was relatively on point, it wouldn't make a difference. I could play Pikarom perfectly, or, you know, as close to well enough as I could when I was first starting out. But, you know, it wouldn't matter, right? ADP was just, well, ADP-Z was just so good and so consistent that it would overcome good gameplay anyway. I mean, especially back then when people hadn't optimized Pikarom to the level it is now. But I digress. And I think on that note, that's probably a good place to wrap up the episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this weird little look at the Zacian League battle deck. But let's be honest, it's an ADP deck all the way through. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Apparently something like 80% of you aren't subbed, so hey, consider sticking around. We occasionally have fun here. Oh, and before I forget, please make sure to check out fellow PokeTuber Professor's research. He's doing a fantastic sealed-only series, and that definitely deserves your attention. I wish I was that good when I started out. I'm just saying. So the link to his show is in the description. And with that said, I'll see you next time. And until then, take it easy.